telling me 50-year-old Nicole Ward, shown in this arrest photo, shot her husband, 53-year-old Damien Ward, in the head, killing him inside their bedroom on Old Chapel Road in Bowie. According to these charging documents, it begins when the couple has a verbal argument early Saturday morning, after Nicole Ward allegedly told police that she looked in Damien's second phone and found photos and messages indicating that Damien was having an extramarital affair with another woman. Nicole Ward allegedly told him to pack his bags and leave the house. The couple continued arguing, and then moments later, that's when police say she pulled out her .357 S&B Magnum revolver, shooting and killing him.
It was the kind of silence that only exists in the suburbs, calm, absolute, and almost sacred. The streets of Bowie, Maryland, lay still under the weight of the early morning hours. At 1:45 a.m., most homes were dark, their families tucked safely inside. But at one house on Old Chapel Road, the quiet was about to be broken by the sound of a gunshot. Moments later, a frantic call echoed through the dispatch lines of Prince George's County. A woman's trembling voice, broken, breathless, reported something unthinkable. Her husband had been shot. She was crying, gasping for words that didn't seem to come. When first responders arrived, the scene told its own story, one of chaos, fear, and irreversible tragedy. The front door was ajar, lights flickered through the foyer, and the scent of gunpowder still hung faintly in the air. Inside, 53-year-old Damien Ward lay motionless on the floor of his home. A single bullet. A single moment. And a life that was now over. As officers rushed to secure the scene, they found his wife, 50-year-old Nicole Ward, distraught and shaking. Her hands were stained with tears and the remnants of the life she had just destroyed. Nearby, on a table, sat the weapon, a .357 Magnum revolver. Cold steel glinting under the house lights, its cylinder open, one round fired. Neighbors soon awoke to the wail of sirens slicing through the night. They stepped out in confusion, wrapped in robes, whispering to each other under the flashing red and blue lights. The Ward home, once a picture of quiet domestic life, was now a crime scene. To the people who lived nearby, Damien and Nicole were the kind of couple you waved to in passing. Middle-aged, professional, and seemingly stable. They'd been in the neighborhood for years. They kept to themselves, never caused trouble, and were rarely the subject of gossip. But behind the front door, hidden from the polished exterior of suburban calm, something had been unraveling. Police began piecing together fragments of that night. There had been an argument, loud enough, maybe, to wake the neighbors if it had gone on long enough. But in the stillness of early morning, no one heard the shouting. No one heard the gunshot. All anyone saw was the aftermath. Inside the house, crime scene technicians moved methodically, photographing, tagging, preserving. Each shell, each stain, each overturned chair was a clue. But amid the evidence, one thing was clear: this wasn't the act of a stranger. There was no forced entry, no signs of a break-in, no struggle beyond the argument itself. This was personal. Damien's body lay where it fell, a silent testament to how fast love can twist into something fatal. The officers on scene could already sense it. The suspect wasn't going to be some shadowy intruder hiding in the dark. The suspect was already there. As detectives separated Nicole for questioning, she appeared dazed, half in shock, half in disbelief. Her words came out in pieces. Something about her husband's phone, about photos she'd found, about betrayal. To investigators, it was a familiar story with a deadly ending: love turned sour, suspicion turned violent. But the question remained: what exactly had happened in the final minutes before that gun went off? The neighborhood was stunned. In the morning, when daylight crept over the police tape, residents gathered in hushed disbelief. They spoke of how Damien was the kind of guy who always smiled, a man who worked hard, kept his yard neat, and waved at everyone. And Nicole, quiet, polite, always walking her dog, never seeming out of sorts. But what no one could see from the outside were the fractures forming beneath the surface. The small resentments, the quiet mistrust, the late-night arguments that slowly turned affection into tension. Now, one was dead, and the other, his wife, was under arrest for murder. As investigators loaded evidence into their vans and forensics packed up their cameras, one question lingered in the air like a ghost. What could make a woman, after 20 years of marriage, pull the trigger on the man she once vowed to love forever? The answer would lie buried deep in the days leading up to that night, hidden in phone screens, in whispered suspicions, in the fragile boundary between anger and despair. Because before the silence of that early morning was broken by gunfire, something else had already died inside the Ward home: trust. And that's where this story begins. To understand how that quiet home on Old Chapel Road became the scene of a homicide, you have to know who Damien Ward and Nicole Ward really were. Because on the surface, they looked like the kind of couple who had figured life out. Damien was 53. He'd built his life on steadiness, steady job, steady income, steady presence. He was the kind of man people described as dependable. A quiet strength. The neighbor who waved when mowing the lawn, the coworker who never raised his voice, the husband who provided. There was nothing about him that screamed headline material. He was normal, perhaps too normal for anyone to imagine he'd end up dead in his own home. Nicole, 3 years younger, was 50. Where Damien was calm and measured, she was expressive, driven by emotion, by conviction, by the sense that everything in her marriage needed to mean something. Friends said she was devoted to her husband, always by his side at gatherings, protective even. But others noticed something else. A tension that seemed to live behind her smile. The way she'd sometimes snap at small things, or how her eyes followed him when he left a room. Together, they appeared solid, two grown adults navigating midlife in suburban Maryland. Their home was well kept, their cars polished, and their routines predictable. To outsiders, they were proof that middle age could still look composed. But the truth is, even the calmest marriages can carry quiet storms. The Wards had been married for years, long enough for habits to harden, long enough for the small irritations to become invisible, and long enough for trust to slowly erode without anyone noticing. They didn't have the kind of drama that turns heads. There were no public fights, no police calls, no visible cracks. But beneath the smiles, resentment was brewing like a fault line ready to split. Damien had always been private. He didn't share much about his feelings, didn't argue much either. To some, that kind of restraint feels like maturity, but to someone like Nicole, it could feel like distance. She wanted connection. Answers. Assurance. And when she didn't get them, her thoughts filled in the silence with suspicion. Over the months leading up to the shooting, that suspicion grew into something darker. According to investigators, Nicole began to believe Damien was hiding something. A secret. A betrayal. She started checking his phone when he wasn't around, scanning through messages, contacts, call logs. She was looking for something, anything, to confirm what her instincts told her. But instinct can be dangerous when mixed with fear. Friends didn't see the full picture. To them, the Wards were functioning as usual: work, home, errands, social media posts that showed vacations and dinners. Nothing hinted at the emotional storm brewing underneath. Then came the phone. The second one. Nicole would later tell police that she discovered another phone belonging to her husband. And on it, pictures. Messages. Proof, she claimed, that he was having an affair. It's unclear whether that affair was real or imagined, but for Nicole, it didn't matter. In that moment, the line between suspicion and certainty vanished. She believed she had finally seen the truth, and that belief became the spark that lit the fire. Behind the walls of that house, late-night arguments began to replace quiet dinners. The same rooms that once held laughter now held accusations and silence. They lived under the same roof, but in different worlds. He, perhaps trying to calm things down. She, drowning in a tide of anger she could no longer control. Psychologists often describe something called emotional fusion, when one partner's identity becomes so tied to the relationship that any betrayal, real or imagined, feels like an attack on the self. To Nicole, losing Damien's love, or the illusion of it, may have felt like losing herself entirely. By early July 2025, the tension had reached a boiling point. The smallest things turned into triggers. He was distant, she was watching. He tried to de-escalate, she took it as guilt. And then came the night that changed everything. On July 18th, neighbors saw nothing unusual. No arguments in the yard, no raised voices. The Ward home looked as calm as ever. But inside, that fragile shell of normalcy was about to crack. Nicole confronted Damien once more, this time with the phone in her hand. The messages, the photos, the betrayal she believed was staring her in the face. What started as confrontation became accusation. What began as anger turned to despair. And somewhere, between heartbreak and rage, Nicole reached for the revolver. To most people, that moment seems unimaginable, how a woman who spent decades beside her husband could end it all with one pull of a trigger. But the truth is, the seeds were planted long before that night. Seeds of insecurity. Possession. Fear of loss. The kind that grows quietly until love and obsession become indistinguishable. In Bowie, the Wards had always looked like the couple who had made it through the storms of life. But no one saw that they were already standing in the eye of one, silent, unseen, and seconds from catastrophe. The cracks in a marriage rarely appear overnight. They start as whispers, subtle, almost invisible. But if you look closely, they're always there, waiting to be heard. For Damien and Nicole Ward, those cracks had been forming for months, maybe even years. It began with distance. The kind that isn't measured in miles but in silence. The easy conversations that once filled their evenings grew shorter. Meals together became quiet. Eye contact became rare. He buried himself in work, and she buried herself in worry. At first, it was little things, a late return home, a phone that was always face down, a message notification dismissed a little too quickly. In a healthy marriage, they might have sparked a simple question. In this one, they became fuel for paranoia. Nicole's suspicion began as unease, but it quickly grew into obsession. She started keeping mental notes of his routines, when he left, when he returned, how long he took to respond to texts. Every inconsistency became a clue. Every gap in his story became evidence. In her mind, she was investigating a betrayal. To the people around them, nothing seemed wrong.
Very nice guy. Not a temper. He stopped a lot of confrontations.
Have you ever seen him have a disagreement or argument with his wife?
No, I've never seen him in an argument with a young lady.
So this comes as a complete surprise.
Complete surprise and utter disgust at what has happened, and sadness and shock.
Nicole's thoughts revolved around Damien's phone, that small rectangle of glass and secrets. When he wasn't looking, she checked it. When he locked it, she wondered why. And when she found the second phone, hidden away, her fears became certainties. Inside that phone, according to what she told police, were messages and photos. Intimate ones. Proof, she claimed, that he was being unfaithful. Whether or not the affair truly existed, it didn't matter anymore. Nicole believed it. And belief can be more powerful than truth. Those messages changed everything. From that moment on, trust was dead. Nicole began confronting Damien more often, questions laced with accusation, anger dressed as heartbreak. He denied, tried to calm her, maybe even pleaded for peace. But every denial only deepened her conviction that he was lying. It's often said that jealousy is love's cruel twin, born from the same passion but shaped by fear instead of faith. Nicole's jealousy had evolved beyond emotion. It was now purpose. She isolated herself, avoiding friends, turning inward. She spent hours replaying old conversations in her mind, searching for inconsistencies. She scrolled through messages, interpreting every line, every emoji, every pause. To her, it was all a puzzle, and she was determined to solve it. Neighbors would later tell reporters that nothing ever seemed off. The Wards still smiled in public. They still went about their days. But behind that facade, arguments were becoming more frequent, more volatile. Damien was tired. He was a man living in a house where peace no longer existed. Maybe he thought things would calm down. Maybe he underestimated how far she'd gone down that spiral. Because for Nicole, this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about control, the need to know, to prove, to make him feel what she felt. The betrayal, imagined or not, had consumed her completely. In those final days, everything was unraveling. Nicole's anger had become a presence in the home, quiet but always there. And Damien, by then, might have sensed what was coming. There's no record of him calling for help. No restraining order. No mention to friends that he feared for his safety. Maybe he believed it was just another fight, that it would pass, like all the others. But sometimes, the red flags aren't seen until it's too late. On that final night, the argument began again, the same themes, the same accusations. The photos. The messages. The lies she believed were hiding behind his calm expression. And this time, there was no walking away. In domestic cases like this, detectives often talk about the moment. The moment when logic breaks, when emotion takes over, and something irreversible happens. For Nicole, that moment was coming. She was a woman trapped in the storm of her own conviction, unable to separate what she thought she knew from what actually was. Every ounce of pain had fermented into rage. And rage, when left unchecked, always finds a weapon. By the time the gun was in her hand, the story was already written. Because love that turns into obsession never ends in silence. It ends in fire, in chaos, and in blood. The signs were there all along. But no one, not even Damien, realized they were warnings. And by the time anyone did, it was already too late. The night of July 19, 2025, began like any other on Old Chapel Road. The air was heavy and still, the kind of summer heat that clings to everything and makes even silence feel thick. Inside the Ward home, the lights were still on long past midnight. Somewhere between accusation and exhaustion, Damien and Nicole were awake, together, yet miles apart. Police would later call it a domestic dispute that turned fatal. But what really happened inside that house before 1:45 a.m. was far more human, and far more tragic, than those 4 words could ever capture. Nicole had spent days seething, spiraling deeper into what she believed was betrayal. The phone, the photos, the messages, proof that Damien had been unfaithful. She claimed it wasn't just one text, not just one image, but a pattern. A story told in pixels and secrets. Maybe Damien thought he could reason with her that night. Maybe he tried to explain, to calm her, to remind her of the years they'd shared. But words are powerless when the other person has already made up their mind about what's true. What began as an argument quickly grew into a storm. Nicole's voice, sharp, breaking, echoed through the quiet home. Damien's replies came slower, steadier, but tired. There are no witnesses to know exactly what was said, but the tension was clear. Every accusation was a cut, every denial a spark. Then came the moment she told him to pack his things. Get out. It wasn't the first time those words had been said in a marriage, but this time, something was different. This time, she meant it. Damien, weary and defeated, began to gather his belongings. The atmosphere inside the house had turned heavy, volatile. And somewhere between the anger and the heartbreak, Nicole walked into another room. She came back with a revolver. A .357 Magnum, solid, cold, powerful. A weapon that doesn't forgive mistakes. She told investigators later that she only wanted to scare him. That she wasn't thinking clearly. That she didn't mean to pull the trigger. But a gun has no patience for second thoughts. In the stillness of that early morning, a single shot tore through the silence. Neighbors didn't hear it, most of them asleep, their homes sealed tight against the night air. But inside the Ward residence, the echo of that shot must have been deafening. Damien fell. The bullet had struck him fatally. He likely didn't even have time to speak. For a few seconds, time stood still. Nicole's world, the rage, the proof, the betrayal, suddenly collapsed into one unbearable truth: she had just killed her husband. When the 911 call came in minutes later, her voice was unsteady. She said he'd been shot, that he wasn't breathing. Dispatchers could hear the panic in her tone, the way reality was beginning to settle in. Police arrived within minutes. The front door was open. The house smelled of gunpowder. They found Damien lying on the floor, unresponsive, a dark stain spreading beneath him. Nearby, on a table, the revolver rested with one spent shell still warm in its chamber. Paramedics tried, but there was nothing to save. Damien Ward was pronounced dead at the scene. Nicole stood nearby, sobbing, trembling. Officers described her as distraught, her words tumbling out in fragments, something about the phone, the affair, the pictures. She said she hadn't meant to kill him, that it was a mistake. But there are no mistakes with a .357 Magnum. There is only the pull of a trigger. As detectives arrived, the scene became methodical. Cameras clicked, markers were placed, and evidence was collected. Blood spatter, shell casing, fingerprints, all preserved to tell the story she couldn't take back. To the police, the story was tragically familiar. Domestic argument. Accusation. Gun. Death. It was a pattern they had seen before, a sequence of emotion, anger, and a split second of irreversible violence. By dawn, the house that once echoed with the sounds of married life, morning routines, shared dinners, quiet conversations, was silent. Only the hum of police radios and the low murmur of investigators filled the air. Outside, the sun rose slowly over Bowie. Neighbors gathered in small clusters behind the yellow tape, whispering in disbelief. Nicole? No way. Not them, they seemed fine. But, seeming fine, is often how tragedy hides. When police finally led Nicole from the house in handcuffs, she didn't fight. She didn't scream. She looked hollow, like a woman walking through the ruins of her own life. Damien was gone. The marriage that once bound them was now reduced to evidence tags and court filings. And the home they had built together was just another crime scene. That single gunshot didn't just kill a man, it destroyed 2 lives, and left a community grasping for answers that may never come. What drove Nicole Ward to that point? Was it jealousy? Betrayal? Or was it the slow, corrosive erosion of trust that finally reached its breaking point? Whatever it was, it ended in blood. Forensic analysts confirmed what the investigators suspected. The bullet's trajectory showed it was fired from several feet away, just enough distance for thought to intervene, if thought had still been present. Then came the phone. Detectives retrieved both of Damien's devices, the one he used daily, and the second one that Nicole claimed to have found. They hoped it would help explain the motive. What they discovered was a mixture of routine communication and a few personal exchanges that, depending on interpretation, could be read as flirtation. Nothing conclusive. Nothing definitive. In other words, there was no concrete proof of an affair. To police, that revelation made the tragedy even heavier. Nicole may have ended her husband's life over suspicions that were never verified, assumptions, half-truths, misread messages. Digital forensics also confirmed that Nicole had accessed both phones repeatedly in the days before the shooting. She had scrolled through messages, taken screenshots, and even searched online phrases like, "how to catch a cheating spouse." The picture forming wasn't of a woman who snapped in an instant. It was of someone who had been building toward a breaking point. When officers canvassed the neighborhood, they learned more. Several residents said they'd occasionally heard raised voices at the Ward home, mostly late at night. One neighbor recalled seeing Nicole sitting in her car outside the house for nearly an hour a few days before the shooting, alone, staring straight ahead. Investigators also checked for prior police calls. None. There was no history of domestic violence reports, no restraining orders, no earlier signs of physical conflict. On paper, they looked like a peaceful couple. But as detectives often say, absence of evidence isn't absence of tension. Inside the evidence lab, technicians matched Nicole's fingerprints to the weapon and her DNA to residue on the trigger. Gunshot residue was found on her hands and clothing. It was undeniable, she had fired the gun. Confronted with the results, Nicole finally stopped insisting it was an accident. She told detectives she was furious that night, hurt beyond reason. She said she wanted him to feel what she felt. That single statement transformed the case. No longer an accident. Not manslaughter. Murder. Prince George's County prosecutors moved quickly, charging Nicole Ward with first- and second-degree murder, along with related firearm offenses. She was held without bond. Meanwhile, the autopsy confirmed what responders already knew. The bullet had struck Damien in the chest, piercing vital organs. Death would have been nearly instantaneous. He never stood a chance. Detectives also reconstructed the final moments before the shooting through digital timestamps. A text Nicole had sent to a friend around midnight mentioned that she had found out everything, and that he'll see what it feels like. That message, time-stamped roughly an hour before the gunshot, became one of the prosecution's strongest indicators of intent. The investigation didn't take long. The facts were clear, the weapon identified, the motive drawn. But clarity doesn't lessen the weight of what happened. In the days following the murder, the police chief called it a tragic example of domestic tension reaching an irreversible point. Local media picked up the story, headlines framing it as yet another case of love turned lethal. And inside a small evidence locker in Maryland, the revolver that once sat quietly in a drawer now lay sealed in a plastic bag, tagged and numbered, a cold symbol of how one emotional decision can end a life. The investigation was over. The truth had been established. But justice was still waiting. Because the next chapter would play out not in a living room or a police station, but in a courtroom, under the gaze of 12 strangers who would decide what Nicole Ward's fate should be. Months after Damien Ward's death, the quiet Maryland community that once knew the couple as the Wards from Bowie now spoke their names with sorrow and disbelief. The story that had started behind closed doors had become a courtroom tragedy, one that would test the boundaries between rage and remorse, between love and murder. Nicole Ward entered the Prince George's County Circuit Court dressed in beige correctional attire, her wrists shackled, her face pale and hollow. She looked nothing like the woman in the family photos that prosecutors would soon display, the smiling wife, the vacation partner, the woman who had once called Damien the love of her life. The state was clear about its mission. They intended to prove that Nicole Ward had not acted out of fear or accident, but out of intent. They painted her as a woman consumed by jealousy, whose obsession with control had metastasized into violence. The prosecutor began with the 911 call, playing it aloud for the jury. Nicole's panicked voice echoed through the courtroom, trembling, incoherent, but unmistakably admitting that she'd shot her husband. The jurors watched her face as the recording played. She didn't look away. But she didn't cry either. She just sat still, staring into nothing, as if she were reliving the moment again. Then came the photographs. Images of the Ward living room, the broken glass, the streak of blood on the tile, the gun resting beside the fallen body of Damien Ward. Each picture told a piece of a story that words could barely contain. The medical examiner took the stand next. They explained that the bullet had entered through Damien's upper chest, causing fatal internal injuries. It was not a warning shot. Not a misfire. It was deliberate, aimed, and deadly. After days of testimony, cross-examinations, and emotional pauses, the jury deliberated. Hours passed. Then, the courtroom door opened. 12 solemn faces filed in. The foreperson stood. The air felt heavy enough to stop breathing. On the charge of second-degree murder, they found Nicole Ward guilty. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Nicole closed her eyes, her head falling forward. Her sister wept quietly behind her. The judge's tone was calm but cold as he delivered the sentence. Nicole Ward was to serve 40 years in prison for the murder of her husband, Damien Ward. In his final remarks, the judge spoke words that would stay with everyone in the room. This tragedy, he said, was born from emotions left unchecked, anger, jealousy, and pain. It is a reminder that in moments of rage, when love turns into possession, lives can be destroyed in seconds. As the bailiffs led Nicole away, she turned once toward the gallery, a single glance, a flicker of remorse, and then she was gone. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered under gray skies. Cameras flashed as prosecutors gave brief statements about justice being served. But to those who knew Damien, the word justice felt hollow. It could not bring him back. It could not rewrite that night. For the community of Bowie, the case of Damien and Nicole Ward became more than a headline. It became a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder that sometimes the people we trust most can become the ones who hurt us beyond repair. The trial was over. The sentence was given. But the echoes of that gunshot would linger far longer than any prison term. When the courtroom emptied and the cameras stopped rolling, the silence that followed was almost unbearable. The story of Damien and Nicole Ward was no longer breaking news, it was just heartbreak left to settle. But for the people who had loved Damien, the pain didn't fade with the verdict. It deepened. In Bowie, Maryland, the house that once held their laughter now stood empty, its blinds drawn, the front lawn untouched. Neighbors passed by slowly, unable to forget the yellow tape that had once wrapped around its porch. Some left flowers. Others simply avoided looking at it at all. Because for them, that home was no longer just a home, it was a monument to what happens when love turns fatal. Friends remembered Damien as calm, steady, and endlessly patient. He was the kind of man who diffused arguments with silence rather than shouting. The kind of man who loved family barbecues, who'd fix a neighbor's car without being asked, who carried peace in his presence. They said he deserved more than to become a name in a headline. His family struggled to make sense of it. His sister described Damien as the glue that held everyone together. His mother, too heartbroken to speak at the sentencing, wrote a letter that prosecutors later read aloud. "My son loved deeply. He believed in marriage, even when it hurt him. He believed in forgiveness. But he didn't deserve this." At his memorial, held in the same church where he and Nicole had once renewed their vows, the atmosphere was heavy with disbelief. Photos of the couple smiling together lined the pews, snapshots of happiness that, in hindsight, felt like scenes from a tragedy no one saw coming. Nicole's absence at that service said everything. She wasn't there to apologize. She couldn't be. She was now inmate number 485201, serving a decades-long sentence for the man she once promised to love forever. Among the community, opinions were divided. Some felt sympathy for Nicole, a woman who had lost her mind to emotional despair, trapped in a storm she couldn't escape. Others couldn't forgive her. They saw her as a warning, a chilling reminder of what happens when suspicion becomes obsession and pain turns into punishment. Years later, the story of Damien and Nicole Ward still circulates in conversations about domestic violence, how it doesn't always come from strangers, and how sometimes the danger comes from the person you trust most. In prison, Nicole is said to have found faith. She attends chapel services, writes letters to her children, and participates in counseling programs for women who committed violent crimes in relationships. She never speaks to the press, but in one letter read during a victims advocacy event, she wrote, "If I could take it back, I would. I thought I was fighting for love. I was wrong. I was fighting my own pain. It's a confession that came too late, but it's the closest thing to closure anyone will ever get. Because closure doesn't really exist in stories like this." There's no ending that makes sense of what happened in that small Maryland home. Just the echo of a gunshot that shattered 2 lives, and the silence that followed. Maybe that's the hardest part of all, the understanding that love, when twisted by anger and fear, can destroy more than it protects. Damien Ward should have turned 54 this year. Instead, his name is spoken in hushed tones, by neighbors, by friends, and by strangers online who stumble upon his story and whisper the same haunting thought: how did it come to this? Because sometimes, the most terrifying mysteries aren't about strangers in the dark. They're about what happens when love itself turns deadly. If this story moved you, take a moment to remember Damien Ward, and every victim of domestic violence who never saw the danger coming. This is Fatal Whispers, where love, betrayal, and darkness meet. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime stories that reveal the darkest corners of the human heart. And as always, every whisper tells a story.